racked it to the left and cracked it to the right.
I knew something was mighty funny.
My head was pounding.
She couldn't hold her head up.
My neck was killing me.
She lost all muscle control.
I was feeling dizzy.
Throwing up all the way across the room.
Everything's great, and the next day I've had a stroke.
And I sat in the hospital 4 days and watched my daughter die.
Don't let them touch your neck.
Thank you for your time and attention to a critical topic, a silent killer, manipulation of the upper cervical area by chiropractors. Our objectives here are really twofold. The primary objective is to raise awareness of the dangers of having a chiropractic adjustment on your neck. The secondary objective is to encourage groups or individuals who have an ability to enact change in this area to do so. For that reason, we are sending this information to members of the U.S. Congress, leaders of the insurance industry, medical professionals, and members of the media. This is not about a conspiracy from the medical profession to control chiropractic. It's not about denying the public from seeking care from whomever they wish. What it is about are families who have lost loved ones and don't want this happening to others. It's also about enlisting the help of healthcare professionals to work together to resolve a valid public health concern. It's about lawmakers using common sense, good judgment, and scientific evidence in their decision making. It's about the media using its considerable influence to educate the public about this dangerous practice. Bottom line, we're asking for a bold measure, a moratorium on all upper neck manipulation.
In the next few minutes, you will meet people who were hardworking, productive citizens, people whose lives were forever changed because they went to a chiropractor and had their upper neck area adjusted and were left disabled or dead as a result. In order to understand what caused their permanent disability, even death, we need to give you a brief history of chiropractic. It all began with Daniel David Palmer, an Iowa grocer who became known as the father of chiropractic.
In the late 1880s, he set up a magnetic healing studio, and some of you may remember from your history that magnetic healing was a popular form of 19th century quackery in which the practitioners believed that their own personal magnetism was so strong it gave them the power to cure disease.
When his son turned it into a money-making enterprise, others came on board in the new world of chiropractic. Schools sprang up, and the only requirement for admission, the ability to pay. Palmer based the entire profession on the concept of vertebral subluxation, that subtle spinal abnormalities cause all disease. It is a concept that simply, scientifically, does not exist. He believed that these subluxations caused spinal nerves to be pinched as they exited the spinal column through holes called foramina. Dr. Bill Kinzinger is a medical doctor who has been researching chiropractic since 1990.
The individual foramen, an individual foramen is about 3 times as large as the spinal nerve that it houses or protects. And the likelihood of that pinching of the nerve ever occurring due to a subtle abnormality is just virtually impossible. The body was designed very efficiently and very effectively, and everyday movement of the spine just doesn't pinch these nerves. It just doesn't happen. Once again, we've got scientific evidence to show that it can't happen, and no evidence to show that it ever has. It's a theory. It was a theory back in 1895. It's no more than a theory today. No proof whatsoever.
Since then, there have been intense lobbying efforts on behalf of chiropractors and an apathetic AMA who washed their hands of the controversial issue following a 1976 lawsuit. Jill Reese's life was full of promise.
Well, I was an attorney. I am an attorney. I was practicing law in Irvine, and I have 3 kids, twin daughters, Catherine, Stephanie, and a teenage son, Keith. Went to Maui a lot, did a lot of family vacations. The girls and I used to rollerblade. That was my favorite thing, and bike riding down to the beach. Our home is close to the beach. Just a simple little life.
But now,
I concentrate on every step. I think to myself, heel, toe, knee bent, knee straight, next leg.
All because her chiropractor adjusted the top 2 vertebrae in her neck and then paralyzed her on the right side of her body. She was referred to a chiropractor by her primary care physician to help get rid of her headaches. What he got rid of was her way of life.
What happened was when the chiropractor adjusted my neck, that adjustment dissected the vertebral artery, and my body immediately tried to heal the area, so blood clots formed. That's why I was able to go home. That's why at first I felt dizzy and all that, and I was sick, but the stroke happened after these blood clots released and went into my brain. So many vertebral artery patients die immediately because the dissection can't be healed. But for me, I had the symptoms, but I didn't have the stroke till after those blood clots released and went into my brain.
It involves the top 2 cervical vertebrae, the atlas and the axis, and in essence the head is extended on the neck and then rapidly and violently from one side to the other.
He just told me to relax, and he kind of moved my head a little bit and then cracked it to the left and cracked it to the right.
Jill's vertebral arteries got torn when the chiropractor violently twisted her neck from one side and then to the other. The most likely place that the tear occurred was here, where the artery takes a 90-degree turn and gets subjected to stretching as it crosses the first cervical vertebrae.
And I thought, okay, we're done, good, I'm gonna feel better. And he said, now sit up. And he said, try moving your neck. So I moved my neck both ways. He said, how do you feel? And I said, well, I don't really feel better. And in fact, I feel kind of nauseous.
The tear in the artery that occurs frequently at that immediate time does not result in the profound consequences. The patient may have an immediate onset of pain in their neck, they may have nausea, dizziness, some things like that, but they don't necessarily have the full-blown consequences.
My head was pounding, my neck was killing me, it was stiff. I was feeling dizzy and sicker than I've ever felt, just uncontrollable, throwing up. And then I'll skip over to 2 days later. I was at work and I was bumping into walls. I would walk toward a door and instead I'd bump into the door jamb. I would walk past my secretary's desk and instead I'd walk into her chair. It was as if I had, and I always say this, a flat tire on my right side. My body just veered to the right.
But over a period of days or sometimes even weeks following that initial injury, a thrombus forms, which is kind of like a blood clot that forms around that tear, and it's the body's response to healing that tear. And down the line, pieces of that thrombus in response to perhaps another manipulation or in response to nothing more than moving around and moving their head, pieces of that thrombus break off, they flow downstream towards the brain. As the blood vessels get smaller and smaller as they get towards the brain, at some point that piece of clot or thrombus becomes too big in relation to the size of the blood vessel to flow any further. It stops all blood flow and that portion of the brain dies.
A few hours later I had a full-blown stroke. My right side was completely paralyzed. I mean, it just, like a ton of bricks. It was just, what has happened here? I mean, one day I'm practicing law and everything's great, and the next day I've had a stroke.
But isn't Jill's tragic outcome only 1 in a million? What do we know for sure? We do have 60 years of documented cases published in the world's most prestigious medical journals, like the Journal of the American Medical Association, Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, Stroke, and Neurology. In fact, in a 2003 study in neurology, researchers found that getting your neck adjusted was an independent risk factor for vertebral artery dissection, which can and often does lead to stroke. There are around 250 million patient visits each year to chiropractors. Statistically, almost 70% of these visits will include an upper cervical adjustment. Why? When most patients come to the chiropractor complaining of low back pain, why take the risk?
We've talked about the insurance industry. In May of 2004, in Canada, the government of Ontario decided to cease payment for all chiropractic services. Health ministers made the decision based partially on the realization that chiropractic manipulation can lead to stroke and disability. Here in the U.S., insurance companies have bowed to pressure from consumers who want chiropractic services covered. But consumers don't have the full story.
Never thought I'd bury my daughter. You'd have to really know her to know how she Her personality made her. She didn't go around here like she thought she was some beauty. She just cut plain old country. She reminded me of what you would call an all-American girl.
Christy Biedenbaugh was the apple of her mother's eye. She was just a few months from her wedding day. She had picked out the perfect dress, but she kept having sinus headaches, and her mother Roxanne suggested Christy go to her mother's chiropractor. After her first adjustment, Christy was dizzy.
Well, being sinus, I didn't think too much about it, so he had her come back on Friday. She told me, she said, I don't think I want to go. But I said, you need to go, you need to get this thing straightened out. So I took her, dropped her off, and I went to the bank to get change. Came back, and I knew something was mighty funny, because everybody was looking at me funny, and they were running around like they didn't know what was going on. And he called me back there, and I have never been so shocked in my life. She couldn't hold her head up. She lost all muscle control of her arms, her legs, and she was actually throwing up all the way across the room, a bright yellow. And I knew then I had a very sick little girl. And he wouldn't even call the ambulance. He drug her out of the office, one arm around his shoulder and one around the nurse's shoulder, and put her in the back of the car and said, get her back to her doctor. He did not want anybody to see what had happened.
Christy's doctor knew something was horribly wrong, and she was rushed to the closest hospital.
She got sicker. She didn't get any better. And I sat in that hospital 4 days and watched my daughter die because of a upper neck spinal manipulation caused by a chiropractor. He robbed me of my daughter's wedding, my grandchildren, and he robbed her of her adult life.
Christy died the day before her 25th birthday.
She was buried in her wedding dress. That was her special dress. And since it was so close to the wedding, just 4 months before her wedding, her fiancé and her brother and I decided, since it was her special dress, that's what we would bury her in.
Alan Botnick was a chiropractor, but he left his practice because of his conscience.
I have the exact same responsibility as a general practitioner of medicine. So if a patient comes to me and I can't diagnose their problem, I'm just giving them a fake diagnosis of vertebral subluxation, I could potentially kill that person. And I wasn't willing to do that to my patients, and you know, it was just, it was too scary.
Chiropractors claim they use cervical manipulation to treat everything from ear infections in babies to asthma to epilepsy. Another tragic example occurred in 1999 when Kimberly Strohecker visited a chiropractor in Pennsylvania. Her chiropractor promised her relief from her epileptic seizures and freedom from the 16 pills she took every day, all from getting chiropractic treatment.
I spent my life so she wouldn't get the next seizure with doctors, not with voodoo, witchcraft.
After days off her medication and days of debilitating grand mal seizures, Kimberly Strohecker died.
Kim was a good, decent person. She deserved to live.
Jump to mommy. Jump.
Life was busy and fulfilling for Californians Jeff and Wendy Venegas. The career couple had 3 children, and Wendy kept their busy lives under control.
She was very energetic.
Wendy was extremely healthy, but suffered from sinus headaches. After 2 sinus surgeries, she wanted relief some other way. So she went to a chiropractor in June of 1999.
In June of '99, Trevor was 5, Tyler was 3, and Victoria was 11 months. This happened on a Monday, the day after we celebrated our 12th wedding anniversary.
Jeff remembers the call he received from the chiropractor's office.
They said, hey, Jeff, Wendy's not responding, we're going to call 911. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, this just is crazy. And she said, you know, don't worry about it, we'll call you and tell her where they're taking her. Just, you know, stay at home and we'll call you.
But he rushed there anyway.
Wendy was lying on the table, and she was non-responsive, kind of in a, I don't know, I guess you call it a prone state, or she was a bit spasmed, and it looked like her tongue was very swollen and she couldn't communicate. And people were just sort of standing around, and I'm like, you know, what are you doing? And one of the paramedics said, well, we're evaluating her, and I'm like, well, I don't see you doing anything, you know.
Wendy was moved to a trauma center and later that evening slipped into a coma.
On Wednesday, she was declared brain dead. And she was always, we used to argue about this. She always had on her driver's license that she wanted to be a donor. We agreed that, you know, they could take whatever they thought they could use, because that's what she would have wanted. So on the 18th, they actually declared her dead. I told my kids it was an accident, that their mom died. But I have to admit, I consider it manslaughter, really. And, you know, it's just, it's very, very sad. You know, it's dramatic. I remember my daughter sending her to school and dressing her more or less like a tomboy, because her dad didn't know how to take care of her hair.
We are asking for 4 things. First, that the medical profession become aware of the potential harm to the patient, so they will be more cautious in their referrals to alternative health care providers, particularly chiropractors who utilize upper cervical manipulation.
Doctors should realize that chiropractors don't have the education they should have to be actually doing high neck spine manipulation. Get together, stop this, ban it, so we can keep our children and our loved ones, even anybody. I don't want anybody to go through what I've been going through.
We are also asking doctors to have a higher index of suspicion when an otherwise young and healthy person comes to see them with unusual symptoms following an upper cervical manipulation.
Obviously, Wendy is not the only person this has happened to. And there's been a lot of people, and people just aren't aware of it.
Secondly, we want to say to the insurance industry that by paying for chiropractic services, you are potentially paying for a client to undergo a risky procedure involving manipulation of the upper cervical vertebrae, which is a known, documented cause of stroke.
By providing coverage, they're in essence endorsing it. And once again, the general public, the clients, the patients, you know, for the most part, I believe that they assume that, well, my insurance is paying for it. It must be, you know, surely they wouldn't pay for it if it wasn't a valid therapy. That's a false assumption. So I think they need to take a look at this, as they have recently in Canada, where we know now that only 3 of the Canadian provinces are providing care for, or providing payment for chiropractic care.
Thirdly, to the lawmakers, you are ultimately responsible for providing safety and security to citizens. We are asking you to initiate legislation to enact an immediate moratorium on chiropractic upper neck manipulation until scientific study can demonstrate that the benefits of this procedure outweigh the risk of stroke, leading to severe permanent disability or death.
Chiropractic is a self-regulated profession. The only people looking after the chiropractors are the chiropractors themselves. It's the ultimate situation of the fox guarding the hen house. If chiropractic upper cervical manipulation were a drug, the FDA would have banned it long ago. But there is no FDA equivalent for chiropractic. There's nobody that's going to stop them, because they're not going to stop themselves, other than the ultimate authority in the United States, and in my opinion, that's the government. We could look at it from a state-by-state issue, but in my opinion, this is important enough that we need our federal lawmakers, our United States senators and representatives, to hold congressional hearings, evaluate this whole issue of upper cervical manipulation causing stroke, leading to death and disability. And what we want to ask them to do is enact an immediate moratorium on this procedure. Once the moratorium was enacted, committees could be set up to evaluate based on the existing evidence. We got plenty of evidence already. We don't need to do any new studies. We need to have objective people, science-based people from all areas, not just medical field, but all areas of science, epidemiologists, ethicists, attorneys, etc., take a look at this evidence and determine at that point if there is any justification for using this procedure, who should use it, and for what.
Stop neck manipulations. There is no reason for them. There is no scientific evidence that it does any good whatsoever. And to me, a dubious good compared to what can go wrong: death, stroke. I don't see any cost benefit there whatsoever.
Please, please start a moratorium. Anything you can do to actually stop chiropractors from doing high neck spinal manipulation. It is too dangerous, and it can cause a severe stroke. It can cause death. And there's nothing that he can really cure from doing high neck spinal manipulation.
And lastly, to the media, we need your help to educate the public about the dangers of upper neck manipulation, to show them the evidence, to tell them a headache is not worth dying for.
We only hear about this in the really, truly tragic cases where somebody actually dies. Maybe sometimes where they're severely injured, but generally we don't even know about the cases where somebody left and they were paralyzed, or they just had trauma to their body, but maybe they recovered. But still, the point is that they had some trauma as a result of it. And who knows how many times that's happened.
What I tell everyone who talks about going to a chiropractor: don't let them touch your neck.
I feel guilty because I suggested that she go, not realizing he was going to kill her.
It's time. It's time to bring this silent killer out into the open. We hope we've raised your awareness of the danger of getting an upper neck manipulation, and we also hope for your help. You're in a unique position to make changes, either in your practice, in your policies, in the law, or in the public's right to know. Please help us keep this preventable tragedy from happening to anyone else.